Horner goes to Ferrari. In today's video, we are going to see the hypotheses of the future of Christian Horner, former team principal of Red Bull. Let's analyze which team he's most likely to join based on reasoning, but there's more to consider. We have to look at the holidays in Sardinia of Toto Wolff and Max Verstappen, not casual, and we also have to hear the words of Max Verstappen himself on the departure of Christian Horner. The garden in Lile's duration is unspecified. Lastly, the Ferrari issue will be addressed in Belgium. Before we start, please leave a supportive like. And now let's get started with the video right away. Christian Horner is officially out of Red Bull and the paddock immediately caught fire? What if I went to Ferrari? According to many, the blunt answer is no, it won't happen now and perhaps never. Horner is incompatible with Maranello because Ferrari is a closed hierarchical system that rejects centralizing managers. And Horner is not just a team principal, he was a chief executive officer, he also managed marketing, he wanted full powers, like Toto Wolff to understand. And at Ferrari, no one commands above the prancing horse, let alone a Briton with co-owner ambitions. Vasseur is still expiring, but Benedetto Vigna has made it clear that there is time to decide. And even if Horner is technically in another category, Ferrari culture would never give him control. Moreover, Horner is not one to settle at 51 years old, he wants to make another leap, build, command and shape a team. Like for example Alpine, where Briatore would give him carte blanche, Ferrari instead wants people in box, not total leaders. There is a precedent of contacts years ago, but it ended abruptly. The reason Christian Horner wanted to decide everything, Ferrari said no, and today the conditions have not changed, so yes, Horner to Ferrari is a suggestion. As a fan it fits, he's an excellent team principal like Toto Wolff, who manages to take a team from nothing to success. If we were to see him again in Formula 1, it will be in a team where he can
be in charge, and
at Maranello the power is divided, it cannot be centered on a single figure. And this is the point, that in Ferrari there is a hierarchical system with different figures in charge of different roles. Christian Horner at Red Bull had almost full power, and that's what Max Verstappen didn't like. This explains the frequent internal discussions between Jos Verstappen and Christian Horner, as Horner wielded too much power at Red Bull. Almost oppressive. Such a thing could not happen in Ferrari, both because we have Benedetto Vigna and John Elkann, who have a lot of power. So the team principal does not have the same importance as Toto Wolff might have in Mercedes, who is also a partner in the company. But before delving into the details of Christian Horner's future, which I have previewed for you, first we need to analyze the story of Lore Mecci, and why was he chosen by Red Bull as the future team principal? What makes him different from Christian Horner? After 20 years at the helm of Red Bull, the man who built one of the most successful teams in history has been sidelined.
And
he announced the news himself at the Milton Keynes factory, his voice filled with emotion. Horner has announced he will no longer be operationally involved in the team. The baton passes to others. In short, Red Bull has turned the page, and taking his place is Laurent Maki, until today team principal of the Racing Bulls, former Ferrari. A stunning comeback to Milton Keynes as the new chief executive officer and team principal of Red Bull Racing.
a double.
Role that even Horner hadn't had for a long time. The decision was made quickly. Horner and two key management figures, the marketing director and communications manager, are leaving. A true and pure action. And everything was confirmed by Oliver Mintzlaff, the Red Bull manager, who oversees global projects and investments. He thanked Horner publicly, but the message is ambiguous about whether it's over. The question is, what started this? According to many, behind the torpedoing there would be the arm wrestling lost with Verstappen. And if indeed Max has imposed his political weight to the point of getting rid of Horner, then the message is even stronger. Today's Red Bull is Verstappen's team. Period. Horner therefore leaves the scene moved, but not broken. In fact, he remains under contract, remains powerful, and remains a figure in search of a new mission.
In the meantime,
Metier assumes leadership of the most successful team in recent years, a significant step accompanied by high expectations and pressures. Will he be able to handle it? And it's inevitable that behind the decision to leave Horner, there's also Max
Verstappen, however.
There, we need to understand if it's a positive or negative key for Red Bull. Positive, in the sense that Verstappen wants to downsize the team and stay in Red Bull, to shape a team around himself, putting a figure like Laurent Mecci at the head of the team who is a manageable figure. Or if, on the contrary, this departure of Horner is the total failure of Red Bull Racing, and so Max Verstappen abandons a ship that is already sinking. A complete overhaul starting from the top is necessary to address this issue. We can only provide an answer to this question in a few months. As of today, we can only make assumptions. So will Max Verstappen stay or will he leave in 2026? A silent struggle between two team members in the Netherlands has been ongoing for months, leading to recent news. On one hand, the Thai ownership with Shalom Jovidia, who has always supported Horner. On the other hand, the Austrian-Dutch front, with Jos Verstappen leading the charge to oust him. Even at Silverstone just last weekend, Jos and Horner were caught arguing in the paddock. Tense faces and tension were apparent. Days later, the earthquake struck. Horner fired with immediate effect, widely praised as Khan's masterstroke. According to this version, Red Bull ousted Horner to retain Max and prevent him from moving to Mercedes in 2026. A desperate move to buy time, hoping that the four-time world champion will stay at least for another year. But a very different version has arrived from the Netherlands. Journalist Eric van Haren, close to the Verstappen family, wrote in The Telegraph that rumors of a request from the Verstappen clan to get rid of Horner are
absurd. Max.
Horner was greeted with a public post, a formal gesture. According to many, the Rios Palace didn't shed any tears. So who's telling the truth? The truth is that this move doesn't guarantee Verstappen's stay at all. Max will decide in the summer, based on what the new Red Bull without Horner can offer him, as the future remains open. Or whether to accept the courtship of Toto Wolff. Raymond Vermeulen, who is Max's manager, was clear. We only look at the sporting aspect. In other words, always winning. Somewhat the same mentality that Marc Marquez also had in MotoGP if we think about it. He didn't want to stay in a prestigious team like Honda and chose to start from the bottom. With Ducati Gresini, because the goal was to drive a winning Ducati, because that's how champions are made, champions also want the best vehicle that allows them to fight for victory. And if Red Bull is not able to offer Verstappen a car to fight for the title, Max will leave. What remains today is a completely transformed Red Bull with Horner out, Mecci on the launch pad. We also saw last year the departure of Adrian Newey, the Austrian ownership taking control again, and a Max that's getting more and more powerful. But be careful, if the technical, political, and sports project of $1 million team revolves around one man, the risk is very high. Red Bull has lost its architects Newey, Marshall, and Whitley, now only Max remains. But will it be enough to stay at the top, or rather to return to the top? This is a chess game, it's definitely being played. On Verstappen's contract, if Verstappen were to stay in Red Bull could also aim for something more in the coming years. Even if the 2026 project is not convincing, quite the opposite. According to various paddock sources, the Red Bull powertrain's power unit is the furthest behind of the 8, although this is not a certainty. We must also examine the relationship between Max Verstappen and Toto Wolff. Christian Horner was distrusted right after the Austrian Grand Prix. The car had collapsed in performance, Verstappen had gone wide in turn 3, and McLaren had given him a second in qualifying. At that moment, the Red Bull leaders realized that the toy was breaking and that the only way to prevent Max's escape was to sacrifice Horner, and despite the loyalty of the Thai owners, Ovidia's family has let go of Horner, and for this reason the Austrian part of the team prevailed. But be careful now, the game moves to Sardinia. Yes, because while the revolution was taking place in Milton Keynes, Max Verstappen and Toto Wolff were relaxing in the sun on two yachts moored a few meters from each other. And no, it's not a coincidence. Mercedes has wanted him for years, and now, with Horner out and Red Bull wounded, the perfect moment to make the move has arrived. Toto Wolff knows that to win in 2026, two things are needed: a new car and Max Verstappen at the wheel. He has already begun discussing the future, vision, and project. And just as Red Bull clings to its champion to avoid sinking, Toto Wolff takes advantage from the other side. But we must stay calm, because Max will decide by the summer where to go for 2026, whether to go to Mercedes or stay at Red Bull. From my perspective, if I were Max and heard those statements from his manager, I would choose Mercedes. Because I'm sure they will have a winning project, or at least in contention for the World Championship from 2026, considering the new Mercedes engine that has proven itself on the test bench. You have a support team behind you with a lot of stability. You don't have to face a revolution with the new Red Bull powertrain's engine with Ford, but do you have a solid, stable engine like Mercedes? You have the guarantee of Toto Wolff, who is a solid team principal. So for Max, you have the clear path to go to Mercedes and then try to fight for the title in the coming years. Also because it's not necessarily, Mercedes doesn't have to be at the top, because we've seen in these years when Red Bull wasn't at maximum levels, like last year for example. Verstappen patched it up and won the driver's title. The same thing could happen at Mercedes, or the 2014 scenario could reoccur with a dominant Mercedes in the new hybrid era. And let's remember that Lewis Hamilton then made this decision to leave McLaren, a prestigious team the year before, in 2012 to then go to Mercedes in 2013 and build history from 2014. In my opinion, Verstappen has in mind to replicate the same scene as Hamilton just over 10 years later. Let's see how long Christian Horner's garden leave will last though, and where he could really go. Horner has been kicked out, but he is not technically free. In fact, Red Bull has put him on live notice until the end of 2025. It means he is still on the payroll, but without any power or access to the team. Starting January 2026, he can consider a new role, possibly in Alpine, an English team in Silverstone, or at Stone Martin. Really, why is McLaren convinced about Andrea? Stella? Alpine, through Briatore, could contact Christian Horner to put him at the top, being an experienced team principal. And he took a team like Red Bull from nothing to victory, so for Alpine it would be a goldmine. Perhaps even in addition with some shares of the company, a bit like Toto Wolff has with Mercedes. This gives an incentive to work well and have more long-term success because it then affects the team and also the stock market listing. And the timing of Christian Horner's gardening leave is not random. January 2026 is the exact date set for the hearing in front of the London Labour Court for the case that happened last year involving Christian Horner. Horner and the employee involved in the scandal will be present. We all remember what happened, and the truth is that Horner is now like a ghost in waiting. We need to see if Alpine will call him as a co-driver, if that option could also be there. Aston Martin, along with a former colleague Adrian Newey, with whom he worked for years, could find themselves together at Aston Martin to build the team's future. But even there, he would want a team listing, as Adrian Newey has already received. And Red Bull currently has a gigantic problem, which is insurmountable. It does not have a strong successor, nor a solid technical structure. And these two single things are enough to make Max doubt and make him leave the team. This is according to my opinion, but I'm curious to know yours as well, because it's a very open question, in my opinion. Christian Horner could really go to either Alpine or Aston Martin. These two teams are Papa BD. I see McLaren a bit more excluded because it is doing well. Currently, they are successful in Formula 1 with Andrea Stella as team principal and Zach Brown as chief executive officer. And McLaren has a hierarchical structure more similar to Ferrari than Red Bull and Mercedes. But let's also take a close look at the work he is doing at Ferrari ahead of Belgium. In fact, while a political war is being fought in Milton Keynes, a more insidious enemy is being fought in Maranello. The feel of the single-seater. Yes, because after the Silverstone qualifiers, Charles Leclerc sent out a clear message, almost a cry for help. He openly spoke about strange issues with his SF25 on the microphone. It's not about the classic wrong balance. It's not understeer or an unstable rear, a nervous and braked car. No, it's something more subtle, harder to observe even with the onboard. Something you only feel at the wheel, the power steering. In fact, Leclerc spoke of unnatural feelings while driving, especially in qualifying. A difficulty that doesn't emerge in slower phases, but manifests at the decisive moment when every millimeter of trajectory counts. Based on the initial analysis, the issue seems to be related to the power steering, which we also discussed yesterday. A hydraulic system that assists with steering and is poorly set can completely lose the driver's feeling. But be careful, it's not a real breakdown, but a wrong setting. And in modern Formula 1, everything goes through the extreme sensitivity of the driver and the micro movements of the hands. And this feeling has changed, especially from the free practice to the qualification, and even more specifically in Q3. Something in the power steering setup was modified between free practice 3 and qualification. The real question is why? Why risk this delicate change on the weekend when seeking a technical response to rivals? Leclerc didn't say it openly, but he implies that the solution is probably already at Spa. And if it was just an issue with power steering calibration, it would be good news as it can be fixed quickly. But if the problem is deeper, related to the entire suspension architecture or the mechanical limit of the system, then it would require much more than a simple adjustment. The new rear suspension will also debut at Spa, which will be tested first at Mugello at filming day next week. And this Hydroguide system will also be set up for next week. So we'll see if it gives clear answers to Leclerc, and we'll see him more convinced than before. Let me know in the comments your opinion on all the topics we covered in the video. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated on all Formula 1 and Ferrari news. Rastro here. See you next video.